Much, David, and it's such a pleasure to join you because I've connected today, and the amount of talent that I have seen um, through the panels and the different speakers has been incredible. So I feel really privileged to join. And as you said, I was talking to you a couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned that perhaps my journey to join tech companies was a little bit unusual. And you made a good point, which is almost everybody in tech has had an unusual journey. In terms of context, I studied translation and interpreting in college. Since age 10, I wanted to be a UN interpreter. And my parents sent me abroad to learn languages from a very young age. And I fell in love with Ireland. Ireland was a country that in the 90s invested very heavily on infrastructure. And that investment paid off. So a lot of companies started to set up headquarters there for Europe, including pharmaceutical companies and then tech companies. So the first one of those companies was Google, and I had the luck to join them at the sweet age of 21. My translator career got derailed by joining Google. My mom is still really upset about it, didn't speak to me for 3 months. You would think I had joined a criminal enterprise rather than a company like Google. And it was a very interesting time because in 2006, when we thought about abuse online, we really thought about manipulation of search engines. And so that was anything from spam to keyword stuffing on certain websites. And there wasn't really much in terms of user generated content beyond websites. But if you fast forward a few years later on, Facebook was establishing headquarters in Europe, and they called me to join their site integrity team. And I was very scared at the beginning. I'll never forget, I come from Spain, really loud family. And over a Christmas period in 2008, when I said I was maybe going to join this company, my dad would Google Facebook and he would scream from the bedroom where the main computer was to the sitting room where we were having dinner. It sounds like it's like MySpace. Why wouldn't you just join MySpace? It sounds like it's a bigger company than Facebook. Who knows what Facebook is? And so, at the time, Facebook was just a very small company. And when I joined, there was two of us in Europe. I joined to do trust and safety, even though at the time it was called user operations. We didn't really know what that meant. And so as we started giving people the ability to report content, we noticed that people would report content that they didn't like. Some of the content could be seen as harmful. We didn't have community standards. And so I just had a colleague and me who would look at one another and be like, do you think we should take this down? Or I don't know, it might be offensive to some, but we didn't really have parameters. And it took a long time of looking at those reports in the front lines to develop some of those. Really fascinating time. I feel very grateful that I was at the right place at the right time. Some of those conversations had elements of philosophy, others had elements of linguistics. The law, especially being based in Europe, where we have very restrictive speech laws because of our past, also played an impact. And as the months went by and we developed, like public policy efforts and comms efforts, we would have regulators, law enforcement reaching out about pieces of content, and our infrastructure had to become more sophisticated. So I ended up joining public policy team, which gave me the ability to eventually work with people like David, but also work with people in the law enforcement field, court authorities, and really see the impact for both the negative and the positive that social media could have. And then if you fast forward a few years, I moved on to Twitter to do very similar work of setting up some of this support infrastructure, figuring out what the right policies should be, figure out how we should comply with local regulation, especially being companies that are that were born in the U.S., where free speech is such a protected element, and that sometimes clashes with the rest of the world. And not only have been incredibly lucky, but I've also seen how online safety has really now taken a position at the front. Whether it's like whistleblowers that are bringing attention to how certain content rules are implemented. to how it impacts certain communities in an unfair way. I was really happy to hear Jasmine talk about before, when she was talking about her work on the Bloom. I did a lot of work on Latin America, and there was a lot of women communities that were impacted by threats online. And I remember talking to them about how they were actually using social media to organize counter speech and to coordinate support for one another. And so I've seen both sides, like the very negative, the very positive. On the very negative, I've done my best to come up with the best community standards, policy rules in all of the companies that I've worked for, always being very close to the front line, seeing what users were saying about abuse. Also trying to figure out the huge challenge of scale. And on the positive side, I've also tried to, empower nonprofits and civil society to harness the power of social media to bring people together and to bring their missions forward. I will say one thing I've learned is not one day is the same as the previous day. You may have a very, good in paper job description that is gonna change just by virtue of the content that you're gonna face every day. And being surrounded by people like you today, the one message I wanted to leave you with is don't feel limited in terms of contributing to tech. You can join companies, you can join civil society, you can bring your voices to the front. Companies like Twitter do a really good job at capturing feedback. And I feel that your voice is very much needed. The teams that work behind the scene on trust and safety always have the best of intentions. I think they are the unsung heroes. Nobody really knows the work they are doing, but they take a great toll to the mental health to protect the tech infrastructure. And it's extremely important that civil society and that academia bring their voices up, so that we can contribute to building a safer internet. So I would just say, thank you so much for having me today. If anybody listening today is more interested in, like, how do you get into tech? How do you go from trust and safety operational support to public policy, to law enforcement relations? I'm always happy to talk to anybody. On LinkedIn, I'm just Patricia Cartes. Please feel free to find me and to connect with me. Send me any questions you may have, but please know that all of the trust and safety team, public policy teams, and just tech in general is like really willing to hear from you, because nobody sets up these platforms to do harm. We set up the platforms to connect the world and to bring different voices together. And, as humans, we are messy, and sometimes abuse, unfortunately, takes over. And so it's really up to us to contribute and build a safer internet together. And I can't wait to hear from you. And as I continue to work in tech now at VSCO, see how we can collaborate and work together. So thank you so much for